Hi, my loves. Welcome to the Cosmic Thread Podcast, your space for ancient wisdom, spiritual depth, and feminine embodiment. I'm your host, Jessie Jade, and here we weave spiritual insights into the modern world so that you can become the highest version of yourself possible. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode. I'm so excited to have you here because today's topic, I'm going to be talking about spiritual awakening, which is a supercharged term that you can find pretty much anywhere on any platform ever. But I love talking about it and I love tuning into it. I love knowing that mine started however many years ago now, and there are so many people that are just starting theirs now or that have been doing it for 50 years. And it's just so beautiful to sometimes look at what people are stepping into now and remembering what that felt like, what it was kind of like to step out of that real matrix bubble. I don't really like the word matrix, but we're running with it. You know, where you feel like things happen to you and not for you, that synchronicities are just coincidences that you have no part in or that don't mean anything to you. You know, so many things like life and circumstances, they're either good or bad rather than completely neutral. You know, there's a lot of things that for those of us that have been in this for a little bit now, we kind of maybe forget that that's how we were operating and how truly incredible it is that we were able to shift those viewpoints in a society that wants to keep you constantly thinking that those viewpoints are facts. And now when we step into our spiritual awakening, it can often be pretty broad. There are so many ways that you can tap in nowadays. You could find your awakening through mathematics, you can find it through quantum physics, through science, you can find it through religion. God, you can find it through surfing, through anything. I know that Instagram was actually really helpful for me, which is super funny. That's not how I found it because I didn't have Instagram. But that's what really helped me deepen into so many levels. I found mine through reading a book that my mum wanted me to read. And I was like, oh, fuck, I don't want to read Deepak Chopra, Mum. Like, I was like 17. I didn't understand. He was a doctor. So I was already like, I don't want to tune into this. And then I read his book and I was like completely shifted from that moment on. And then I wanted more. I Googled every single thing I could fathom. I then went on to Instagram and I started to just look at all of these amazing accounts. And they varied. My spiritual journey very much varied from there. Maybe you guys can relate, but I've been everywhere from, oh God, like Arcturian, Pleiadian, like galactic, star-seeded type vibes to just like the simple empaths and clairvoyance and quantum physics. I've been on every single rabbit hole, like beings in other dimensions, all of it. I've even been down like the entities path, and I believe in all of it. It's all totally my jam. It's all fully my thing. But that's the thing about spirituality and this kind of awakening is it is so broad. I mean, I know so many people that do not believe in what I believe in, and they're highly spiritual. They're like, that's fucking crazy. And that's the awesome thing, is that this isn't an organized religion. There is no one way to believe. There is no one way to tap in, and there is no one thing that governs you. It's completely subjective, and all roads lead to the same thing essentially. But there are infinite ways that you can look at it, and it's so incredibly beautiful. So to anybody who is just starting their spiritual awakening, welcome. It's a wild ride. I also kind of want to just put this out there. I use spiritual awakening, but I don't believe in that term personally. I just use it because it's easier to grasp. I believe that we have a human awakening because we are essentially spirit. We're not humans. We're spirit incarnated in human form. So we're having a human awakening in this incarnation before our human self eventually goes back to earth and we continue on. So that's where spiritual awakening, I'm a little bit like, it's overly used. It's supercharged. isn't actually really a correct definition, but we're just going to use it for the sake of it making the most sense. So a couple of things that happen when you have a spiritual awakening, I kind of mentioned them before. You start to realize that you are not a victim of your circumstance. And this can actually be both liberating and kind of crushing, because you realize that there's nobody to blame anymore. And I know that I'm going to assume all of us, we've all grown up with the idea that we could blame other people for how we feel. That person called me ugly, so I got really angry and I yelled at them and I hate them now and it's totally their fault. But then you start to realize that that's not the case at all. That you completely have all of the control over your reactions and whether you want to react, whether you even want to feel like a victim, or whether you want to feel crushed by what they said. You have every single right to be able to hear that and just go, okay. You don't have to respond. You don't even have to care. You could hear it and not think a single thing. You could hear it and think, wow, they must be really not feeling okay if they feel like they need to project that. I hope they're all right. Or you might even take it as a compliment. Maybe being ugly is a compliment to you and you fucking love that because you get to decide what is a compliment and what is offensive at all times. You also get to decide your reactions in this world. And that is a really hard pill to swallow. It's liberating, but then you realize how hard it is because there's no one to blame anymore. But then the other thing you go through is that you then go, all right, well, fuck, I got to blame myself. But no, you're not to blame either. There is no blaming. There's taking responsibility for our part in every single situation, even the most painful ones. It's not someone else's responsibility for our feelings and how we react. It's ours. And so when we start to strip back that layer of living a life where everything is everyone else's fault, the fact that I can't get into a good loving relationship is because my mom and dad had a shit relationship, or the fact that I'm this way is because of that thing that happened to me when I was 13. It's like, no. These are all things that happened, whether they were beautiful or not. These were all things that happened that shifted and created who you are today. And you can use that as a catalyst for something really beautiful, something profound, or as a way to relate to other people on a level that you would have never have been able to relate on before. Or you can use it as your victimization and demise. And there are some people that have gone through the most awful things I can imagine. And they have turned it into their greatest triumph. And look, not everyone's soul contract is to do that in this life. Some people, it is really just to sit in the pain and not see the beauty. And that's okay, because we have a million more incarnations to come where we get to shift that contract. But that is one huge thing that happens when we shift out of our spiritual or into our spiritual awakening, is we start to realize that we're no longer a victim and the duality that comes with that feeling. Another thing that starts to happen is you start to realize that absolutely everything is connected. That your internal environment and how you're speaking to yourself and how you're treating people, they are all connected. What's going on internally is going to reflect externally in your relationships, in your work, in what happens on your daily commutes. Everything is connected. And when everything on the outside is feeling like it is falling apart, we need to go in. And that can be really hard. And again, it is not blame, but it's understanding that everything starts from an internal space. That's what happens when we're manifesting. These internal micro thoughts, micro feelings, micro movements are influencing and creating our external macro thoughts, macro feelings, and macro movements. So when you start to look at things instead of coincidences, they become synchronicities. And we start to realize that if everything is connected and our internal and our external are all mirroring each other, that when we're thinking about, oh my God, I really want to start dance. I really want to start dance. I feel like I have so much I could unlock just by learning how to move my hips. And then the next day you're going down to your local store and you hear somebody talking about a new dance class that's opening up down the road. That's not a coincidence. That is a synchronicity, and that is the universe nudging you towards a choice that you could make that will bring you all of these new feelings, all of these new perspectives, and maybe you'll unlock some amazing trauma in your body. Maybe you'll become a dancer. Maybe you'll start a fucking Instagram account that gets millions of views, and that's your new thing, and you didn't even think that that was going to happen. So synchronicities are always happening, and they're always those little things that feel kind of like low-key or high-key, but sometimes low-key really magical. You know, you'll be walking past, or you might use a word that you've never ever used in your life, and then the next day your partner says it in conversation with somebody and they weren't there for it in the first place, and you're like, how did he say that? And then you start to tune in and you realize that word was actually guiding you into a new thought that you needed to look into, or into a new practice. Everything is connected, and that is a huge aspect of the spiritual human awakening. Once you start to see synchronicities, you really get to see that you are on an aligned path. So a couple of things that start to happen. Oftentimes you'll start to see, and this kind of like lines up with synchronicities, but you'll often see angel numbers. And angel numbers are 111, 222, 1234, 555, 876, all of the things. Or it could be like 151. This is the universe speaking to you. And this is often her way of nudging you towards the thought that you were just having, or the path that you're currently on, or the idea that you're coming up with in the moment. You might be walking down the road and thinking, I really want to start a podcast. I really want to start one. Oh God, how am I going to do it? I don't know. Will anyone listen? And then you look up and it's 111. That's confirmation. Right there, when you start to see repeating numbers, that is confirmation of the thought that you were just having. Or sometimes it can get crazy where every single time you look at the clock, it is, angel numbers. And this happened to me for years, every single time I looked at the clock. And I kind of took it as like, if I looked at the clock and there were angel numbers, which was every single time, I was in alignment. And then if I happen to look at the clock and there rarely wasn't a repeating number, I was like, oh, I'm out of alignment. But that's not the case. You're not just falling in and out of alignment because you see numbers everywhere, or you don't. But it is just the way that the universe is communicating to you. And it's really fucking magical, especially when you're driving and you just see a random license plate that says like 888. And you can look up these numbers because every single number has a different meaning. 0 through to 9 has a completely different meaning. And if every number has a different meaning, then when you have 181, then the meaning of 1, the meaning of 8, and the meaning of 1 again all go together, and you can look them up and place them together for their meanings. It's actually really cool. It's really amazing. And it can get kind of complex and diverse. You can just Google it. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I kind of stopped Googling them a year or so ago just because it became like my whole life. But yeah, angel numbers, they're incredible and they're really fun, and they're a super great way to tap in and, watch yourself being nudged and guided along the way. And another thing that starts to happen when you're on this awakening path is you start to let go of people in your life. And this one can be a little bit not so fun, but it's also very liberating. You'll often find that people will start to fall away because they don't understand you. And that can feel really lonely. That can feel like there's something wrong with you, and like you want to kind of go back and unlearn what you've learned. And the problem with that is you can't unknow something. And so when you start to tune into this place where you're living in more alignment and you're happier and all these things are happening for you and not to you, and you start to probably speak a little bit differently and think a little bit differently, and maybe you don't want to sit in those low vibe conversations where you catch up with your girlfriend and she sits and bitches about her life, then you sit and bitch about your life, and then you guys go home. It's no longer this kind of low frequency offloading energy where you're realizing you're just circulating all this negativity. And you start to not really want to be a part of that. So then when you catch up with that girlfriend and instead you want to ask her like what her thoughts are on this idea of life that you have, or what good things are happening in her life, what's she excited about, and she doesn't really know how to communicate that, and she can only talk about the low frequency stuff, and you try that for a while, but she's just not catching on. Maybe you even bring it up to her, but it's starting to fizzle. Well, you let that go. People are going to get triggered by your transformation. Family and friends are going to get triggered by who you are now, because you're not the same person that they could just kind of offload with and talk about really negative stuff with and feed the addiction with. Or maybe you trigger them because they're part of organized religion and it goes against their thoughts and views. Or maybe they just don't understand the way that you speak and that's really triggering for them. And all of that is divine. All of that is okay, and you're not doing anything wrong in that moment. In fact, when we trigger people by just being ourselves, this is a gift to everybody involved. It is a gift to us for our authenticity, and it is a gift to them because you were clearly, if you're triggered and if you're triggering somebody, they're listening to you and you're triggering them, they're supposed to be getting triggered in that moment. They're supposed to be tuning into this feeling, and whether they want to dislike you for it or whether they want to take that and go, okay, I learned something from them, or whether they hate you in that moment, but what you said is actually a catalyst over the next few years for something that's stuck in their mind and help them get out of whatever rut or relationship or space they're in. You don't know why you've been placed in front of somebody in that moment. And you can't control that. So when you make yourself small and you just go, okay, well, I'll be spiritual behind closed doors, but I'll just talk about all the stuff that I usually talk about with everybody and just to make everybody comfortable, you make yourself small and you get in the way of their triggers, their awakenings, the necessary things that they're supposed to be hearing in this moment to help become a catalyst and a shift for them. And it can be very uncomfortable. It can be very isolating. I felt isolated for quite a few years because there was no one in my life that tuned into this kind of stuff. I mean, like I just projected all of it onto my parents because I could. And I'm very lucky they love me unconditionally. And my mom absolutely could tune in to a lot of it because she is the one that kind of kickstarted my spiritual journey. But then when I was off with the Pleiadians and the Arcturians and the star beings and the other dimensions, I know she was like, all right. Shit, okay, trying to understand and download it. And my dad he isn't as subscribed as I am, but he just loves where I'm at and he loves me and supports me through it. So I am lucky. I am very lucky in that way. But I did lose majority of friends, majority of people that I had in my life that were my age and made me feel safe and seen and heard and supported in that way. And it took me quite a few years before I could find somebody else. And this is a really common journey. But this is also where social media can come in really helpful because we can follow people that have a community backed behind them that make us feel seen and heard and validated. And when we're going on those lonely hermit journeys, they're purposed. We're supposed to be on that journey in that moment. Otherwise, we wouldn't be. The hermit is a very, very sacred journey that most of us go through on this life where we get to find out who we are without somebody else. But after a while, it can feel a little bit like, oh, am I going to find anyone that I can relate to on this level? And you will. You always will. But in spirituality, becoming a friend and a lover and a supporter of yourself, that is going to get you so far. It's also going to make you magnetic. And it's also going to make you different from everybody else because it's going to show that you don't actually need other people's validation to help you move forward in this life happily. And you start to magnetize people into your life because you're no longer coming from a desperate place of friendship. You're coming from a grounded space of knowing who you are. And so you start to attract that frequency of people that are interested in you because you're not surrounding yourself with all these shiny things or all these people that seem like they're just going to listen to you. And it's a really powerful, beautiful space to be in. But it takes time. it definitely takes time in this kind of space that you're in. So spiritual awakenings, they come with a lot of highs and lows, a lot of triggers and a lot of beautiful things. And it's just about accepting where you're at, accepting that this journey doesn't have an end point. You are not going to find the end of it in this lifetime. There is no end goal, because spirituality is in death, and it is in life, and it is in death again, and it is in life again. It's in all of the cycles. It's not in this one life. So you have infinite lessons to learn in infinite dimensions and infinite realms, and that can be both liberating and daunting. There's the duality. But wherever you are on this path, it is extremely sacred. Whether you're, I don't want to say just beginning, because all of life is spiritual. All of it, no matter where we are, what we believe in, your life itself is spiritual. But no matter where we're at on this spectrum and in our own thought process, we just need to be gentle with ourselves, gentle with others, and kind. There is no one way to do it. If you believe in a certain spirituality, do not project that onto other people as if their version of spirituality is wrong or incorrect. It's all right. It's all just very subjective, and that can sometimes rub us up the wrong way. But if you're getting triggered by somebody else's spirituality, then that is shadow work for you to do. And it takes time. It took me a really long time to be able to even listen to the word God without having my own angry perception. And now I use God all the time. I worship God. And God is universe. God is source. God is all things. God is goddess. God isn't some dude in the sky for me. But it took me a very long time and a lot of shadow work to be able to tune into that. So no matter where you are, just give yourself love and compassion and gratitude for the fact that you've brought yourself here and you're bringing yourself through all of these amazing lessons and viewpoints that you're going to have for the rest of your life. If you're struggling to find a support system, just know that you have one here. You have one in this podcast. You have one on so many platforms and social media. There are so many people that want to connect with spiritual baddies and spiritual girls and guys. And we've just got to look. And if you're in your hermit phase, then I get you. Ooh, I get you. Majority of my life has been the hermit. And that is beautiful too. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I really just wanted to just lightly tap on spiritual awakening and some of the phases and things we can go through when we're just tuning into this. Or even if we've been on it for a little while, it's nice to come back and remember. Remember where we were. Remember where people are at the moment and hold compassion. So that concludes our episode today. Thank you for tuning into the Cosmic Thread podcast. If you're feeling called, please share a comment about what you loved or what you're vibing with in this episode. I'd love to hear some of the things that you went through in your spiritual awakening or what you're currently going through now, no matter where you're at on that spectrum. And if this content speaks to you, please subscribe and share this episode with somebody that you love. If you have any episodes that you want to see in the future, please reach out and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you're vibing with and any guests that you want to see on the podcast. Thank you for listening. Until next time, my loves.